All right. Hey everyone, my name is Rodolphe and I'm here to tell you about remote work and to share my journey as well. So as we get started, I have a question for you all. How many of you are currently working remotely? Can you stick your hand up? All right, that's about, say, 15% of the room, 20% maybe. How many of you want to work remotely at some point? Right on. Okay, so we've got a fair few people interested, maybe a third of the room. I'm here today to share my journey, what I've been up to for the last few years, and to tell you what I believe in as well. So my journey is this. I've been in the remote space for about 5 years now. I started off as an employee working at a remote startup at a place named Buffer, and I'll tell you about that later on. And then I loved it so much. I was so excited about remote work that I started a community around it called Remotive. It's remotive.io, and we gather over 25,000 people that are crazy interested about remote work. And now I want to tell you about what I believe in as well, because I'm an advocate, as in I want to share what I feel has been good in my life and what's been helping so many other people around me, such as I believe that we can work from the place that makes us the happiest, and I believe that remote work needs a lot of trust in order to go well. So let's dive in and see what's been happening. And I want to get started by sharing a piece of news I discovered just last week. That was quite amazing, I found. So I want to go back to a city that Vincent mentioned during his talk, the city of Tulsa. And we received a piece of news from the city of Tulsa, located in Oklahoma in the center of the US. It's about 400,000 people big, and I didn't know much about the city. But just last week, something remarkable happened. They put up a website called Tulsa Remote, and they said, "Hi, remote workers, we'll pay you to work from our city." Interesting. I've been in the space for a while, and it caught my attention. It said, "You're going to love it here." So I started clicking around and see what is this entire program about. Well, they set it up as a program, and they say this: if you apply to come to us, and if you get selected, we'll offer you up to $10,000 in cash, a desk at a local co-working space, and a housing stipend to get you started. And when I saw all this, I started to think about how much trust is this city providing to remote workers. They believe that attracting the right talent will be good for the community, will be good for the jobs, and will be good for the city overall. And everyone here in this room is a tech professional, I believe. And if you think about how your career may be going, you all make decisions at some point. You've seen the news about Amazon, for instance, starting a new headquarters in New York City and in Washington, D.C. And we're here in Paris today. You have tech hubs around the world, San Francisco, London, you know them. But you can make a decision, you can make a conscious decision today that you couldn't quite make 5 years ago, which is this. You could be continuing a career in an awesome, value-driven, and successful remote team without sacrificing what you do and the quality of your work. And that is a massive change. This is something we can do today that you couldn't quite do before. And it's starting to be ticking in my head. I'm starting to ask myself a few questions. So if we walk down memory lane, if we go back in the past 4 minutes, why am I here today? Why am I here telling you about remote work and about trust? Well, I started my career working at Google many years ago. And as I got started at Google, I got to take that picture, and Larry Page wasn't too happy with me. Sergey Brin wasn't too happy with me because I was taking pictures. I was so excited to be here in Mountain View, California during the big meetup that I wasn't paying attention. I was just taking pictures of everything. I was fresh out of college, and walking in the campus, in the headquarters in Mountain View, California, was like going to Disneyland for geeks. I was so excited about that. You get everything you wish for. Volleyball courts, swimming pools, and all services were available, alongside with amazing and talented people. But one thing felt off to me. One thing was a little bit strange in my head. Why was it that so many of those talented people would be living in San Francisco and working in Mountain View, California, and as a result, most people will be commuting for an hour and a half each way. And each and every day will spend about 2 to 3 hours stuck in a car commuting. Loved the company, loved what they were standing for, but commuting for 3 hours a day, that wasn't my thing. So I started to think about that a little bit more. And a couple of years later, I decided to resign. And I went on my own journey, starting to ask myself other questions, such as, why do we work this way? Why do we work the way we do? Here's one for you. Do we always need to work from offices? All of you know that work also happens outside of work. You may get your best ideas under the shower, or when you're walking your dog through a park. And also, do we always need to work from 9 to 5? What's up with that? I'm a morning person. My best work is done before lunch. Afterwards, A lot of people I know do their best work from midnight to 2 a.m. And you know what? That's absolutely fine. We're adults, we're tenured professionals. And what I wish for you all, alongside with myself, is for you to find an environment that is rewarding how you work, are you happy, and where your energy is going towards. Because life is too short to fight your energy and to fight the way you want to work. So all of the question led me to embrace remote work and to join a remote team. A few years ago, I joined a team named buffer.com. At the time, they were, and they still are, a remote startup. 0 offices and everyone is remote. If you have a laptop computer and an internet connection, it's good enough. So I took my laptop and I went on the road. Buenos Aires, Singapore, Sydney, Reykjavik. I worked from everywhere. And I was with them for 3 years. It was my job as director of operation to make remote work work. So I helped them to grow from 15 up to 80 employees. And that was an amazing journey. Getting people working from all time zones and creating a culture as you scale was absolutely great. And if there's one thing I learned over the last 5 years working with a variety of remote teams, is that there's a single component I can find that is absolutely essential for remote work to work. It is a high trust environment. You need to have trust within your company for remote work to be pleasant with everyone involved. And I want to deep dive into that because I feel we don't speak about it just enough. And my internal motto, what I believe in today, what I advocate for, is that companies, big or small, in tech or outside of it, should offer more trust to their employees, and as a result, you may get successful remote work. So what is remote trust? I'll tell you about trust, I'll tell you about remote work. And I found a very handy definition. Here it is for you. There are no advantages for people who come into the office and no disadvantages to staying home to get your work done. That's ideal. That's the ideal trust. You're not penalized if you work from home. You don't have an upside if you work from the office. That's a level playing field, which feels very nice, very enjoyable. Oops, we're not loading anymore. And I want to give you examples. We're reconnecting, but that's fine. So I want to give you an example of what trust may look like. And we had some example with Vincent in Algolia. And one example I really liked as a remote worker is Trello. Trello said, well, if you work remotely, it could be very intimidating to be that one person dialing in from the computer and having everyone around you just, well, stare at your face. And you may not feel compelled to participate. They said, no more. We, Trello, are going to start a 1 laptop per person policy, which means it doesn't matter if you're 2, 20, or 200 people, everyone's connecting from a single laptop. And that is evening the playing field. And beyond the small tip that is enjoyable for an employee, it's sending a very strong signal. Because essentially it's saying, yes, you also are remote workers' first-class citizen because we go out of our way to make it more enjoyable. Other companies such as Zapier, for instance, they will send you swag directly to your door, to your personal door. So you don't have the fear of missing out with a package coming to the office. If they have crazy socks or a cap or a t-shirt, it comes directly to your door. The second example I have for trust in remote work is GitLab. GitLab is a huge company. It's 400 people big. And they have this thing where they say, well, we have 400 people and we're entirely remote. Can you imagine how complex it must be to run such a company? They said, we want to have simplicity across the board. So let's create a handbook, which, by the way, is both transparent and public. So if you Google it, you will find it. And it is so thorough that if you were to print it out, it will be 2,000 pages thick. Can you imagine how big that is? 2,000 pages thick. And what they say is, if you have a question, you'll find it in the handbook, because we have a culture of documenting things. We have a culture of having a single point of truth. So that is dissolving conflicts of back channel information and little chit-chat in corridor. We have a single point of truth. And also, we have a culture of improvement where we say, I, GitLab, a unicorn valued over $1 billion, I'm okay to say that I do not know exactly how to do remote work. And if any one of you have a question, look it up in handbook. If the answer is not present, add it to the handbook, because we're building this culture together. So it's not only transparency, but it's belonging as well. We're creating that remote culture together. It makes a huge difference when it comes to belonging and when it comes to feeling part of the team. And one of the big questions that people ask me a lot is, okay, you tell me about remote work, you tell me about trust, but how do I know if remote workers are actually working? The big answer is you don't. You never know. You never know when someone is actually working. And to go even further in that spirit, if you feel scared by not knowing whether someone is working remotely or not, you don't have a remote work problem. You have a trust problem in your organization. And that's something we need to acknowledge. If we have a butt in the seat policy, someone will work just as hard as for you to be leaving the room and playing a YouTube video yet over again. So you need to fix trust before you need to fix remote. If someone is not going to be managed by output and only is going to be managed by hours and presence, then don't do remote work. Save yourself, your employee, and your company some trouble. If there's no trust, I'd rather not go remote, because life is too short. Who's using Slack here on a daily or weekly basis? Slack users, a lot of you, us, yes. We all know from experience that time online is not necessarily time being productive. Yet we all know about the green dot tyranny. Oh, I have a green dot, or I don't have a green dot. And I'm not in the office, so my manager may be thinking, am I working or not working? And we have a problem with that. We have an immediacy problem with that. Because if we expect someone with a green dot to be answering any message coming in immediately, then it's really hard, because we get an immediacy culture and our concentration is going to fall down. When you see a green dot, here's what it should mean. It should mean that person is currently with Slack open. Please leave a message now, and they will come back when they're done doing what they are doing, and then they reply. If you don't set up a culture where people can work with their own hours, with trust in what's happening, then remote work is unlikely to work, because it's policing. You want someone with a green dot, which doesn't feel too good for a manager, because you're checking on people, and for the employee, because you have zero trust, and you're likely to have people quitting very fast. Here's a quote that sums it up very nicely, folks. Here's almost a quote that sums it up very nicely. Check it out. Treat chat like a sauna. Stay a while, but then get out. Documentation and discussion for important things should happen outside of Slack. If someone wants to see what has been happening, they should find a single point of truth elsewhere. Dropbox paper, Google Drive, someplace else. If it's happening in Slack, I don't think it's good for anyone, because we used to have one inbox, email inbox. Now we have 50 inboxes and 20 Slacks. What's up with that? We're losing the one currency we do not have more of, which is concentration. So high trust environment is extremely important for remote work, and it's extremely important for us to strive in that environment. But I'm going to acknowledge it as well. Being in the office is not exactly the same as working from home. There are problems as well. It's not only fun and games. Remote work may feel lonely to most of us. Isolation is a huge problem. How do you wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to start working, when you could be doing other things or staying in bed a little bit later? It's a problem we all struggle with. I've been remote for 5 years. I still struggle with that. And isolation is something we must acknowledge. When we all here in this room, it's a lunch meetup. afterwards you can go back to work. When you're by yourself, it's very tough. And the single toughest thing for remote workers is not when to start working, which is tough. It's when to stop working. Yes, I said it, when to stop working. All three speakers here, Vincent, Julie, and myself, we also work with the US. What's going to happen when it's 7 p.m. in France and Eastern is just going for it and Pacific time is having a great old time waking up? Can you attend this meeting? Can I have this by the end of business today? You're going to have to make decisions, and you've got to communicating with your team, saying when your day is going to end, what's reasonable and what's unreasonable. Because all unspoken agreements are going to be detrimental to remote workers, and you're going to have a bad time. So you need to have those conversations, although they feel uncomfortable. And I want to leave you with a couple of tips. And I wanted to add cats to this video because they look awesome. Two things that I've found work fantastically well for me is having peers. Having peers mean I have people I go and go to the gym with or sports with. I have people I go on vacation with. I have people that I see for lunch and after drinks. Remote work doesn't need to be isolated, but you need to work in order to be integrated in other communities. At work, it's pretty easy. It's easy to find people for lunch. It's easy to find people to go for a beer. You need to recreate that when you're a remote worker. And the environment, Vincent mentioned it as well. I need to go to a co-working space so that I don't feel stuck working from home. Otherwise, I have one single little box in my head, which is work, work, work. I want to have two boxes, work and home. It helps me to have two different spaces. And thinking about all that, thinking about this talk, thinking about what we've been saying right now, I spend an awful lot of time on Twitter. And I've been trying to sum up this presentation and what I believe in a tweet. And that's what I'd like to leave you with before we go to Q&A. So here's what I came up with. Dear tech companies, please offer trust, not toys. I love you toys, I need your trust. If I've got trust, please send the toys as a nice gift. I'd appreciate that. If it's only toys, life is too short. We're all adults. We all need to move at a stage in our career where you need to leave from the place that makes you the happiest, to be flexible, to be ambitious in your career, and to move to the place that you enjoy. And to find people that embrace flexibility and that are not scared by it. If they're scared by it, I argue you need to find another workplace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rodolphe. Does anyone have questions? Yes.
Thanks for the talk. How you manage the salary for one people that travel around the world when you can go to third countries and America, Canada?
Okay, so I feel like the question's about digital nomads and people who travel. Digital nomads are interesting because you see them a lot on Instagram and on the internet, and it's a beautiful thing to travel and work at the same time. I've certainly done it myself. The important thing is for you to give a clear expectation to your team and the team to have a clear expectation of what's required. So if your work and your hours are entirely uncorrelated, you can go and work from anywhere as long as your output is good. I'm thinking about sales, I'm thinking about engineering, that's pretty transparent. If you work in certain hours, such as customer support, chances are you're gonna need to adapt your travels, your sleep pattern, and everything else to fit in your hours. So it all depends whether someone can do whatever they want, whenever they want, and they still do it, because traveling is an added complexity atop of remote work. Working in office, remote work may be more complicated or just different, as in you may not be used to it. And traveling, being digital nomad, is something else altogether. Had you chase hotspots? Had you still have battery? How do you find yourself welcome in an environment? So to answer your question, anyone who's a remote worker and that want to go someplace different, start going somewhere familiar for 2 weeks and see how you go. And then start going someplace exotic for 2 weeks or 1 month and see how you go. But do not try to change cities every single day or every single week, because chances are you'll get very, very tired from it. Your energy is going to be down, and I'll argue that will impact your work as well. So start small trips, and then build it up. Some people are good at working and traveling. Otherwise, other people hate it. It's a matter of preference.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. So you talked about two companies that are doing full remote, GitLab and Buffer. And I wondered, how can you manage as a company to do full remote? Because you talked about GitLab with 400 employees. And I think I know that Buffer do remote with all their employees, but it's not actually employees. They are becoming contractors to be employees. So how do you handle a full remote company without creating precarity for your employees?
So that's a great one. When you are a company, usually many of those remote startups are based in the US. What often happens is that people based in the US are full-time equivalents, so they have at-will employment, which is lesser job security than France, but it's still a contract. And other people tend to be contractors. So it is up to the company to think about two things. First, how can I replicate the perks and benefits? How can I give you other things such as maybe health insurance or other perks that other people can have in a variety of countries? Because it does change country to country. Most small startups tend to hire people locally as contractors and then mirror the perks you have. So they give you a cash stipend and you, employee, spend it on different things. When you become larger as a company, such as Automatic, another company with 700 people, or Envision, 700 people, and you're still remote, then you can go to a Big Four accounting firm and say, please establish my presence in those countries and please start giving perks to my employees as full-time equivalents. So the best way to manage it is to mimic it for people that are everywhere until you have the shoulder and the cash to pay people to set you up properly and to have big and nice operation in each and every country.
Yes.
Thanks for the presentation. Very interesting to see your focus on trust as the building block of remote culture. One question I'm wondering is, where does this trust come from? Is it a matter of defining the right company culture from the beginning and then keeping it strong? Do you have can you share examples on what makes trust disappear, or the opposite? How can one build trust within an existing company?
Okay, so how do you build trust in a company? I feel like your actions are building trust. It's the same as leadership. Leadership and management are two different things. Management is what you actually, like, you can read books about management. You've got to become a leader. It's the same with values and trust. You can have values, but trust will be shown and will be tested at every single corner. So for instance, when things are going well, you can establish trust. But where trust really shows is when things are not going too well. What's your process for letting someone go? What's your process for downsizing your company if something goes bad? What's your process for doing performance improvement review if someone is underperforming? And how consistent are you? How open are you to talk about those things? As in, I, Mr. or Mrs. Company, don't know if I'm very good at this. Please let me give you, please, you employee, give me your input. How open you are, how consistent you are at making decisions that are coherent towards employees. Are you taking the employee's side or the shareholder's side? Doesn't have to be either or, but in some cases it's pretty obvious what's happening. All those things, all those small decisions will be put under scrutiny. So trust is only as good as the series of decisions made by those who've been empowered, C-levels, management, and team leaders. So it's why people that have handbooks, for instance, are often a little bit ahead, because how things are going to go if things go well or not well is already outlined. And if you go a little bit further, it even becomes a recruitment tool. If you want to go and work at GitLab, you can know before applying how things is going to unfold if things go well or don't go well. So it's not a black box anymore. It's not a, we'll talk about it if things get that far. It's, okay, we've seen that situation or we don't know, but I'm willing to talk about it. So trust is tested at every corner and action determines trust. Dernière ou genre? All right.
Yes, last question.
Sorry. Hi there. You mentioned when you were talking about remote work, you talked about isolation and how it was up to the remote worker to go find communities outside of work to communicate with people. And what do you do about, like, well, how did Buffer or how does GitLab make sure that employees are not socializing, but getting to know each other and talking to each other, not just talking about work? I mean, that's an important part of an office.
Yeah, great question. So very, very briefly, we have people fly in. I love remote work. I believe in remote work. Face-to-face is still number one. You need to fly in. You need to see people to create report. That's number one. Number two, start your meeting talking about your life, talking about your days. An hour meeting, 10 minutes about chit-chat. What has happened over the weekend? How do you feel? What's new with your kid? Building reports, super important. And then everything else. Buffer has a book club. People in 10 different time zones pick a book, decide what to read. 1 month later, they meet in a virtual hangout and they discuss the book they've been reading. And they will have common parts of interest. Maybe it's parenting. Maybe it's living in an RV and touring around the US. So how do you create the culture and how do you ask questions to get people out of their shell and stop the work delivery and open them up to their personality? Meeting face-to-face and providing the opportunity to tell your own story. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rodolphe.